Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Redeem Her Time podcast. You are in for a treat today because we are talking with someone who's helping us to be faithful on the clock, right? How many of us are, feel like time is ticking? And especially as we're working, we want to make sure that we're doing it with purpose and conviction. And we really want to tie work and worship together. And so I brought Wanda on with me today. Wanda and I have become friends over the past couple of months. She is the host of Being Faithful on the Clock podcast. So make sure that you go and follow that as well. And we're going to have a really fun conversation. So welcome, Wanda. I'm so excited for you to be here today.
Thank you. I really appreciate the invitation to be on.
Good. Well, I always like to kind of like let us get to know you a little bit. Like I said, you and I have been hanging out here for a few weeks and months, but my audience is wanting to get to know you. So tell us a little bit about what you're juggling in this season of life.
Sure. Well, I am a professional freelance business writer. My main work is writing for executives and professionals. So I'm very much in that business-oriented space. But I do really all kinds of projects on the side. But I do work through my business website is takingdictation.com. But in terms of juggling, I do have many other side projects. Right now, I am in the middle of launching a devotional, which is called Grace in the Grind.
Mm.
I also have another book I'm hoping will be out or finished in spring or summer of next year, and that is called Joyful God, and that is really about trauma recovery after or recovering joy after trauma.
Mm.
So those are two very big projects that I'm working on, and I have two Substacks that are also related to those projects. So it is a lot on top of family things as well. So
Yeah, well, when you're a writer, when it's like that's what's in you, it's like you
yes,
can't not be doing that, right? And
right.
so, so I love that you're finding different opportunities, whether it's writing for someone else, but then also writing about these
Mhm.
things that God has put on your heart, to be able to help people with this. So let's talk about Faithful on the Clock. I really want to kind of focus in there because, of course, my radar went up as soon as I saw the name of your podcast, and of course, anything related to time, and how we spend our
Mhm.
time matters, right? So tell us a little bit about like kind of maybe where that name came from. Like I would love to hear if there's a story or a journey behind, how that came about and how you're serving others through that part of your business.
Sure. Well, a kind of a side, I don't want to call it a hobby, but an interest of mine is psychology. And so any area where there is cognitive dissonance, I really kind of am drawn to that because I feel like if we can resolve those dissonances, people will have more joy, right? And so that's been a big focus of mine is just kind of trying to figure out people and where do they have those conflicts. And the one that I kept seeing in my own work was the conflict between faith and work.
Mm.
How in the world do we live out our faith when the world is telling us, well, there are so many other norms where you can't talk about your faith or you have to do it according to these operations and policies? So, Faithful on the Clock really started to try to resolve that and to give people some guidance of how do I come into the office in a practical way. And it's not necessarily saying, oh, I believe in God, but modeling Him so that people can say, this person is different. What is it about them? And just kind of open that door. And if you have to, of course, you can take a stand for God, but just really modeling that and being comfortable doing that. It's so that, I mean, we're at work, 8 hours or more a day, and there's no reason why that should feel awful, right? So that's my goal is to help people feel better in their work.
I love that. I've often heard like use action, like speak with your actions and use words if necessary.
Yes, yes.
You're right. We have like this captive audience, whether you're going into an office and you've got, those coworkers who are around you, or a lot of my listeners are business owners, but we're
Mhm.
interacting all day long with clients and team members and peers and mentors and coaches and, things like that. And so here, I love the marriage of the two. And one of the things that, I actually was just reflecting on before we got together today is that in Hebrew, the word for work and the word for worship are actually the same word,
Mhm.
avodah. And I love that because it's like they aren't separated. It's not like, well, this is my work life and then this is my everything else, or this is my worship time and then this is, when I do everything else. They are intended to be this integral connectedness, where our faith is a part of everything. And we talk about that around here. Like we talk about having a with God business. We're not just doing things for God, we're doing things with God, right? And there's this partnership going on here. And then, like you said, it ends up being a witness, whether they're a believer or whether they're not, right? We are the aroma of Christ. I was just reading that this morning in 2 Corinthians, right? Like people are going to, either smell it and be like, wow, that's amazing. I mean, it is offensive to those
Yes.
who don't know him, or hopefully it's going to draw them in. And so, what a great opportunity. And so that means we want to be really intentional about incorporating our faith with the way we do our work, even if we're not like, talking out loud about it. So let's talk a little bit more about that because like you said, sometimes it can feel like, we have to kind of let go of certain things or be quiet about certain things, our beliefs, our
Yeah.
values, kind of these deep core things when we step into a situation and we're around others who, may or may not be of the same faith that we are. So, how does, like, as you describe it, holding the line on our faith values and those foundational behaviors, like, how does this relate to the work that we do and the interactions we have with clients or peers or team?
Sure. Well, first, I want to say that my belief is that God holds the line for us every single day against
Girl.
darkness and against the devil, both literally or literally and figuratively, and through his character. We certainly see that, at the Red Sea where he's leading the people out of Egypt. He's right there on the front line. But I think probably the best story to model that is the story of Job. And we usually take that story and say, well, when you're struggling, this is how you have faith. But to me, this is a story of holding the line. It's Job holding the line on his faith. But if you look at that story, God already knew Job's character, and Job already knew God. So then you have to say, okay, well, if he wasn't testing Job, what was he doing? He was holding the line against the devil and saying, the only way the devil is going to learn that I know what's what, is to have him see Job hold. So I am going to hold that line. I'm going to allow this. It's not because I like it, as I don't want to see Job suffer, but I will hold that line so that the devil doesn't gain ground. And then later, you see Jesus doing the exact same thing, same purpose. So that's kind of why I say there is a biblical scripture for doing this. And if we can incorporate that into our work and everyday life, we have the model for that. We absolutely have the model for that. But bringing it into the office, I really think it's just a form of risk management, if you want to think of it like that.
Okay, tell
I'm
us
not
more. I'm
sure.
curious.
Yeah. Well, if you think of, have you ever heard of inversion thinking at all?
Why don't you go ahead and define it? Just because
Sure.
I think some of our listeners may have an
Sure.
idea, some may be like, I have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So let's not
Well,
assume anything.
yeah. And that's why I ask. But inversion thinking is basically where you take a goal that you have and you look backwards
Hmm.
and you basically are trying to identify the potential points of failure. And then you're saying, okay, well, how can we find solutions for those points so that things don't fail? Right. So that's why I call it risk management. Right. And all I'm really asking people to do is say, what is the single core point, the foundational one that cannot break? Because the others you can address later, right? You have to get to those eventually. But that core point, that's the one you have to hold the line on. If you cannot defend that behavior or that value, everything above that falls.
Can
So
you
if
give us
you
an
can identify,
example? Like I would love kind of give us like, okay, what might that be so that we can start thinking about that practically in our heads?
sure. Well, I'll take my devotional as an example to try and get that out. I understand there is this big complicated process for publishing, on your own. So you've got to get your stuff off on Amazon and all these things with cover design and whatnot. But the biggest thing is just making sure I have the one single draft that is edited to work from. If I don't have that, I cannot move forward on anything else. That is the linchpin, right? So all of my behaviors have to center in terms of, structuring my time, have to make that the priority. If that fails, I got nothing,
Hmm.
right?
Okay.
So that's a very simple example of how that can come into play. But I mean, that can play into your relationships as well. If you say, okay, well, what is their biggest pet peeve that we just can't get past? If we can't work past that, we don't even really have a relationship. Or like, if you think of like marriages and things like that, what is the one thing that we have to agree on? That's your cornerstone, and that's where you hold the line.
Yeah, and my audience is familiar. We talk about the one thing around here
Hmm.
because otherwise we are distracted, right? We're scattered
Sure.
all over the place. And like you said, if that one core thing that then leads to everything else isn't primary or isn't happening, then nothing else is happening. So,
Right.
what tends to cause us to get distracted or to compromise these core things, these one
Oh
thing?
gosh.
Like, let's be
The,
honest, there are a lot of
the
squirrels out there these days, right? That we're chasing all day long.
Oh gosh, I'll try to keep it brief because there's quite a bit. There is quite a bit. Um, I would say the first thing is probably just sheer overwhelm. The
Mm,
sheer number of things that are competing for our attention, they make us exhausted just trying to sort through things. And then we feel like giving in and not holding the line is the way we're going to get a little rest, right? So it becomes a compromise in the wrong direction, if that makes sense.
yes.
And then we can also have a lack of modeling. If we haven't had good, strong role models to say this is how you do this, you're going to be all over the place. And you're going to essentially, another problem that relates to that is people pleasing. If you have been in a family that has had a lot of conflict, maybe, or maybe you've been in a workplace where that's been the norm and you've had that modeled, and maybe they've been wishy-washy and management hasn't had been able to agree on anything. You don't know what holding the line looks like, so you don't know where to start.
Mm,
Um, I think lack of resources and safety nets is another big one, um, especially for women, because we earn less. Um, we often do the brunt of the caregiving. So we have those things competing. And I think we can sometimes feel like the ideal level or higher level is almost a pipe dream.
mm,
Like compromising can feel sensible because at least then we don't get nothing,
mm.
right?
Okay.
Um, so, like for example, my mother, my home life was not that great, and at many points, I kind of wished that we could leave, but she did not have the money to do that, and maybe she had that focus in her mind of I want to hold the line and protect my kids, but because of those lack of resources, she
Mm,
had no way to do that. So I know, that might resonate with a lot of people out there too, where they're like, how do I even move forward? I don't have what I need to do. My values are there, but I can't.
mm.
So I think that gets in the way a lot.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. For sure.
yeah.
And then what I can sense is like there can be this like internal conflict going on, even if,
Hmm.
and it's because we get out of alignment then. So what does it
It's,
cost us in
oh
time,
gosh.
in our
Yeah,
work, in even maybe our faith and our kingdom impact if we allow ourselves to get out of alignment?
sure. Again, there's quite a bit that we can sacrifice for it. I think the first thing is visibility.
Mm,
Because if you are not holding the line, people can bypass you because you compromise yourself. You seem wishy-washy, so they go to the people who don't. So
mm,
then you don't get seen, you don't get the opportunities, which is the next thing that you sacrifice because you're not presenting yourself consistently. Um, you also have, of course, money and time
mm,
because if you aren't focused on the most critical points in the business or your career, you end up having to go back and fix things and troubleshoot all the time. So things are not efficient. And then, of course, as they say, time is money. So the more things you have to fix, the more it costs you. Um, and then just peace of mind
yeah.
because there's a confidence that comes from knowing what really deserves your attention. And I don't want to say what you need to worry about because, we're not supposed to worry, but what are we supposed to care about? Maybe I'll put it that way.
Sure.
And if you can't identify that and fight for it, you're going to be worried about all these other things that don't even matter, right?
Mm,
So it's, again, that overwhelm comes in. And then the last thing I think is probably just your interpersonal joy.
yeah.
Because if you cannot get people aligned together to fight and hold the line together, you're going to have so much conflict.
Mm.
And what sucks the joy out of the room? Like conflict,
Right.
right?
Yeah. And
So,
like you
and
said,
that,
it will always cost us more down the road. It may feel comfortable
mhm,
in the moment to, give in or to compromise or whatever that is, but like you said, it's going to have this ripple effect in all these areas, and those things are going to get bigger and
oh,
be big
yes,
messes and problems and issues. We'll have the bigger chasm that we have to
hmm,
address down the
for
road
sure.
rather
Yep.
than, yeah, yeah. So it's not where we want to stay, right? Like
No,
here on the podcast, we're not just about more information.
Yeah,
We're about that. We're about implementation. We're about like, how do I actually invest time in doing this thing, so that I can avoid that, but also move towards, right?
sure.
The fruit of the work that God has called me to do. So let's talk about like how do you help people now that we've talked about maybe what are some of the things that could distract them, could cause them to compromise, the
Mhm.
costs that are going to happen if they do that. Um, how can we really identify those values or those, what does matter to hold the line on? And then what are some practical steps to start taking or thinking about that can move us in that direction?
Sure. Um, well, I can't speak for everybody, but I can give you things that have really helped me.
Sure.
And hopefully they'll be helpful for other people as well. Um, I try to really look for reoccurring themes and
Mm,
friction points. If something is coming up over and over and over again, you just kind of keep fighting about it. Um, that's when you have to ask, okay, when have similar plans gone wrong? And what was missing? What was broken in that moment? Because if you can identify that, you can always work that in. You can always build that, right? But if you can't even identify it, it's always going to break, right?
mm,
So just, I would say, look for those repeating patterns. Maybe even journal about it to say, okay, well,
mm,
such and such day this happened and it didn't work. And maybe in that moment, you can't really identify it. But the more you see that pattern, if you keep those notes, that's when you can start to see it. Oh, it was that,
mm.
right? And
Right.
maybe even have other people, another set of eyes, take a look at those notes and say, I'm too close to this situation, right? You take a look. You give me your opinion on it because sometimes that's what we need. We need other mentors and counselors to take a look at it,
Yeah, and I'm
right?
having this visual, like I'm thinking like, if something keeps having friction on it or keeps, kind of getting force on, eventually it's going to weaken it, even if we can't
Right,
crack, right?
right.
And then eventually, right, that thing's going to happen and it's just going to break and you're going to have two pieces, right, rather than one.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
noticing is such a good thing. Okay.
yeah. Let's see. I would say look at the worst case scenario. Um, because if you can say which value or behavioral failure would be the most catastrophic, kind of use your imagination there, and look ahead. Because the value or behavior whose absence causes the largest ripple is probably the foundational one. So if
Mm,
you're going through this in your head and you play the tape to the end and you're like, oh my gosh, don't even want to think about that. That is a huge sign that you've just identified something foundational that you really need to protect.
yeah, yeah, right. The big things, like you said, the one thing, right, that maybe is that layers down, but we want to make sure that that foundation is solid because otherwise the storms come, right? And what
Hmm.
happens? I'm thinking of like Jesus' parable of, the two guys that built the houses, right? And from the outside,
Yeah,
they both looked great, right? But when that storm
yeah,
came, it was the one on the rock, the one in the foundation, that actually stood and weathered the storm. It was the one
hmm,
on sand that the storms of life, kind of took out. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, another note that I want to point out about that and why I say the worst case scenario is because I think there is this tendency in the business space to a degree. I think we're maybe getting away from it and we're kind of learning. But this idea of toxic positivity, that we don't want to even think about the worst case possible scenario. It's always going to be flowers and rainbows. We're going to win, right? We're not even going to think about failure, just tough it through. But you have to be realistic and
Sure.
say this is a potential point of failure because otherwise you can't protect it. You're
Yeah.
just ignoring it, right?
Mm,
So being willing to acknowledge is a huge part of what you have to do. It's not trying to be overly positive. It's, you can be hopeful, but as they say, hope is not a strategy, and you do have to plan around what could potentially happen. So if you say this is the most damaging thing I could possibly ever imagine going wrong in my business, well, then work on that. Like at all costs, defend it, right?
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Right. Like, and we have to, as business owners, especially because that's so much of my audience, right? We have to take time to pause and
Hmm.
assess. My husband just got his CDL. And so one of the things that a truck driver has to do before every single drive is they have to do this like safety check. They have to go around and
Yes,
make sure there aren't any cracks, in certain parts of the vehicle or the trailer, because otherwise there's going to be a lot of damage done on the highway, right? And he's
for
also
sure.
a police officer, so he deals with all of that on the other side, and yet how many of us just we jump into the next day, we jump into the next task,
Mhm.
we're not really paying attention to A, how's my foundation? B, do I have any cracks I need to take some time to shore up or address or things
Mhm.
like that? And then we wonder why, things kind of seem to fall apart one day, if we've
Sure.
been given it time and attention. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, what I'm really getting at is that there's a balance between the two.
Sure, sure.
Because you have to, like I said, you have to have some hope. But again, that realism to say things can go wrong and to be realistic about that and say, I am going to plan accordingly. That is being responsible. And I
Yes.
know you in the past have talked about the talents and being good stewards.
Mm,
That's the way that I see this, is that you are stewarding and protecting what you have as you kind of imagine what could go wrong.
mm.
You don't hope those things go wrong,
Yeah.
but you're acknowledging them so that you can protect yourself.
Yeah, it's like being a defensive driver, right? You're paying
Yes.
attention to what's
Yes.
going on around you so that are ready, if all of a sudden, something comes all the way into your, line of view or across your lane or that kind of thing versus just being the person who's I'm just barreling down the highway,
Hmm.
hoping I'm going to get there and not really paying
Yeah.
attention. So I love this because I think we sometimes we think I don't have time to stop and notice, right? And this acknowledging, this awareness has been really coming up in all these different things you've talked about. And so this is time well spent. And so I want to like kind of circle back to something that my audience is very familiar with. We talk a lot about ROTI, return on time invested,
Hmm.
right? So when we do push pause, even with a to-do list that's, a mile long, even
Yeah.
with a full calendar and all of that, like what is the return on this on time invested in identifying what those core values are or those core needs or those core priorities and and really protecting them? What's like what impact does that have?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge everywhere. I mean, the first thing is that it gives the business a definitive focus
Mm,
because you know that core line that you have to defend, and everybody can rally around it. Again, there's less concept, but you don't get distracted and waste time on what doesn't matter. You don't have those distractions. So things become much more efficient in the long run if you take the time to do that. Um, real resource allocation becomes leaner because you're not focused on, oh, maybe we should do this. You know that we got to hold the line here. So you're not getting on into all this side stuff. You know where things have to go. There's increased alignment, like I said, because there's less conflict.
mm,
All of your decisions start to come from a real place of clarity. So that gets faster. It kind of starts to snowball if you really think about it. Everybody knows exactly what's necessary. I like to compare it to parenting in a way, where you set the boundary. And the reason you set the boundary and the expectation is so that if people test it and you hold, eventually what you will see, if you are a parent or know somebody who is a parent, you will see that child eventually stop pushing that line
oh, so true.
because they know where it is,
Yeah,
right? It's not that they don't want to. Everybody knows they want to, but they just learned that it's not going to move.
yeah.
So if you hold the line, eventually all those people in your business, I'm going to complain, right? It's not that they don't have those feelings anymore, but they learn, okay, this is not productive. And so they learn more effective ways to talk about it, or maybe they approach it from a different angle. So then things actually start to move
Mm,
rather than just being a conflict all the time.
yeah,
And that really, to me, that is a huge thing for protecting energy, which
sure.
is another benefit because, again, drain that energy right out of the room. When I have to argue with people, oh, that is the worst.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, right. And it has this ripple effect and
yeah,
everything because then you take,
yeah,
with you into at the dinner table or into, the next conversation or into
yes.
just your thought life and let therein, I think we like leave this door open for the enemy to
Hmm.
be able to come in and yeah, keep us swirling in, in these feelings and things like that. And that's not going to move us towards the kingdom impact that we're called to.
Yeah.
So I'd
Well,
love to kind of like go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, like, that does, when you're talking about how, like, that ripple effect, and it not just being at your work life. I mean, you do bring things home, whether we want to, that line that we thought we had between work and home, that's gone. I mean, like, let's just admit it, it's gone.
Especially for those of us who work from
Yeah,
home, I think it's really easy
exactly.
to like just let everything, in some ways,
Yeah.
thing, but in some ways it can be a challenge.
Yeah. So to understand that holding that line at work is in a way also holding the line to protect your home. They are related, and vice versa. If you are, calm in your work life, then you can come into the office and be calm and bring that mindset into. So, I mean, it goes both ways. It absolutely does.
Yeah.
But those relationships are a huge one to protect through this.
Yeah.
But the last thing that I really wanted to touch on was just the spiritual rejuvenation
Mhm.
that you get. Because all of those other things, as people see the fruits of what you are doing, that if they see that holding the line actually gets you somewhere, it's positive. You have more opportunities to express gratitude to God and be reflecting in a positive way. You have more opportunity to trust the calling that He is giving to you because you see more roadie, more time on your, or more return on your time investment. And the reduction in conflicts, and the improvement in the time and the way that you can spend that time with people. I'm a big joy person. So if all of that starts to settle because you held the line, you are going to live a more joyful life. And who does not want that? That
Right.
is to me, our entire purpose of life is to model the joy of God and to model it right back to Him. That to me is our purpose. Our calling, as I think I've mentioned to you before, our calling is simply the path by which we live that purpose out.
Mm.
But the purpose is always to give God joy.
Mm.
So if holding the line gives you joy and it gives God joy, let's do it.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. So what would you say? I like to boil this kind of down to like one
Mhm.
thing, right? Like what would be that maybe one piece of encouragement or that one thing that you would say to that woman listening today who maybe has been struggling in this area, who hasn't been holding the line, who has had that internal conflict or the external conflict, and really doesn't want to stay in that place?
Sure. Um, I would say especially because women carry so much, right? And it's easy to portray holding the line as like this huge battle, right? Sword in hand. That's why we how we want to portray it. And I have in a lot of ways. Um, but I also think that we need to think of holding the line as everyday defense.
Mm.
Like if you think about it and if you think about, okay, I'm going to defend this city. The way you defend a city is you build the wall, right? But what are you doing every single day? You've got people going out to check that wall. You've got to make sure that, you're doing repairs, you're making improvements on that wall so that it will hold. Why? So that then you can be resting inside that wall so that when Goliath actually comes, you can go out and fight. So
Yeah.
holding the line, keeping that wall, it's not always like this huge battle. And I think we get overwhelmed and say, I can't hold the line because we don't picture ourselves like Goliath or fighting Goliath. But we can go and check the wall. We
Yeah.
can do those little things a little bit every day. And that rest that we get from having the solid wall that we've built, then we do have the strength. When Goliath comes, we got him. We can take him. With God's
Yeah.
help, we can do
Yeah.
it.
And it's not always just about keeping the bad stuff out. It's about protecting
Right.
the good stuff inside. I always think
Yes.
about boundaries. People think boundaries are
Hmm.
selfish and boundaries are,
Oh, no.
like keeping people away. But I'm like, what are you doing with a boundary? You're protecting what's inside that boundary because it's someone or something that matters. And, so we have to also, I think our focus more needs to be on what's inside,
Yes.
those core values, those things that God has, called us to, this bigger purpose that we have. And that's what we're protecting, right? Versus,
Hmm.
just trying to fight every giant that comes
Right.
comes our
Right.
way. So, oh, I
Well, I
love
mean,
this.
that's the thing though. I mean, why do you fight the giant?
Yeah,
Because you have something to protect,
right.
right? So all I'm asking is identify the thing you want to protect
Yeah,
and center on it. That's it.
yeah, yeah. So good. So good.
Yeah.
Girl, we could talk all day. We've scratched the surface of what this is because
Sure.
there's so many practical applications.
Yeah.
When you think about, our spiritual life, when you think about our work life, when you think about our family life, even our
Hmm.
health and things like that. So we're going to continue the conversation over inside the Redeem Her Time community. My community is familiar with this, that we always say, what are we going to do with this next, right? We're not just going to
Yes.
talk about it. Like we actually want to do it and be able to connect with our guests. So I'm excited to invite you in there. And everyone who's listening, if you're not a member yet of the Redeem Her Time community, come join us, redeemhertime.com/community. You're going to find a great group of women where we are passionate and on purpose when it comes to our time, our calling, the the roles, responsibilities, and businesses that God has given us. And we're there to encourage and equip one another. So join us there. And I would love to know, like, where can people find you, Wanda? Like, what resources do you have that would be like a great next step for someone that we can send them to, yeah, get some more support from you?
Sure. So I have a core calling worksheet that I will give you for free. Right at the end of that, there will be another audio devotional that'll help you get more grounded about, what God might be asking you to protect and defend. And then if you'd like, you can also register for the free content. I also have paid content there. But in terms of just, taking a second step, you can register for free at faithfulontheclock.com.
All right. Well, we'll make sure to link to those things in the show notes so you guys can go and find that. I'm always about sharing resources because you never know who needs to hear this. And so I want you, listener, to be thinking, who do you know that needs to hear this conversation? Share this with her and say, hey, I thought of you. I thought you might want to check this out. So thank you so much, Wanda, for blessing us today. I know
Yeah.
that so many are going to be blessed. This is going to be have a good return on time invested. And I always like to end with this question. So this episode is coming out kind of as we're starting fourth quarter, right? So like we've got these
Mhm.
last few months of the year. We all know the holidays are, kind of right around the corner, and then we've got a new year. So before we get to that and kind of write off this time, I like to focus on this one question with my clients. And so I ask it of my guests, what is it time for? So when you look at, kind of this season in front of you right now, what would you say that it's time for in your life or business? And what kind of return on investment are you expectant of?
Yeah, I would definitely say locking into the pivot that I have made to help Christian professionals. I was, open to anyone, but now I really want to focus on that Christian side. So I really want to lean into that. But also with all these projects, I would like to finish those and just rest inside my wall for just a little bit so I can go and fight Goliath later. That is my next season, is just resting up for a little while.
Yeah, and we need those seasons of rest
Oh,
because
yes.
we know that there will be times to fight and times to grow and
Mhm.
times to do, some of these other things. So, well,
Yep.
thank you for blessing us today, Wanda. I
Yeah,
appreciate
thank
you,
you.
and we'll look forward to talking soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa.